You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
Okay, I'm honored and privileged to be joined by a friend, Coach Gus. Coach Gus is joining us, and whenever I get the chance to talk with Concordia alumni, it warms my heart. How are you, Coach Gus? I'm happy we got a chance to get this going.
I'm doing well at my Concordia or I should say my Montreal peeps. It's good. It's good. It's good. I have fond memories of Montreal, and I have fond memories of my time there, and it's always nice to connect. And we saw each other last summer, or a couple. I don't know if that was last summer, or a couple of summers ago out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice. I have a I
Yeah.
have a I have a warm place in my heart for people from Montreal. So
Yeah, give your shout outs to the Montreal guys. Montreal, yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm still friends with Jay Prosper
Mm-hmm.
and Gates Prosper and Guylaine and all those people, that Mark Bain, and I still talk to them, and they're good people, man. And as much as I can go back there, I go back because it's just a great time. It's a much more fun city than living in Toronto, believe it or not. I know that's kind of like
Really?
blasphemous to say as a Torontonian, but I definitely
No.
spend my time there
Okay,
more.
we actually have to stay on that. Like, what is it? What is it about Montreal that you like better than Toronto?
You don't have to plan like 4 weeks in advance just to see a friend. Like people will just like drop by. Like it's like old school in that sense. Like people will just come by, they'll see you, they'll hang out, they'll be close. They don't have to like make a plan. Like it's just like, and it's normal to just go out and just hang out and go for a nightcap, and like it's just different. Whereas Toronto's so kind of regulated and regimented, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's a bigger space obviously in Toronto, and it's just like
Mm-hmm.
like a baby New York or whatever. Whereas Montreal still has that more authentic, smaller city feel to it. Even though it's a big city, it's just got that feel
Yeah.
to it. I think people enjoy living there more than they do out this way.
Be-
But that's just the feeling I have.
Being here, I kind of find like being having been here for 3 going on 4 years. I feel like everything's so fast over here. It's like
Yeah.
boom, 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 and like you said, like a very underrated part about Montreal is we get the metro system, right? We have
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have we have the ability to move from one side of the city to the other. But I feel like in Toronto, it's like it's an hour 30 on traffic, and you have to plan, like you said, you got to plan to see people. And then
Yeah.
that's why a lot of times like people, I guess, get caught up.
I just stay home. Like I'll just stay home. You know what I mean? So whereas Montreal's just like all right there, and it's
Mhm.
just easier to access, right? It's easier to
Mhm.
access wherever you want to go. And the food is better there too. I'm
Ooh,
not slandering. I'm a Torontonian, but I know it sounds very slanderous, but
yeah.
actual too. So
We can probably talk about food. I love food, so we can probably talk about food forever. Um, just continuing diving down into this time that you had in Montreal. You were a varsity athlete from '95 to 2000. Um,
yeah.
um, talk to me about your playing experience, having played for the Concordia Stingers, and just what you remember about being an athlete during that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was all new to me, obviously, because like most kids, you move from high school to university, and you're moving cities. I didn't really know anybody there. I just kind of moved with my parents, and I might have known like one or two people. So just moving from Toronto to Montreal and not even knowing where I was going,
Mm-hmm.
and taking a risk, just like, that was a pretty strong team. I joined in 95 because the year before in 94, they just lost in the national championship game to the University of Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the players were returning except for one, I believe. So I was just walking into like, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know. I was just walking into that environment. It was a really strong team. We had a lot of size, and I don't know if you remember, like, so I'm obviously much
Yeah,
older, but
yeah.
Max
Coach,
Bouchard,
coached by John Doerr.
John Doerr, and he was a
Mhm.
tough New Yorker. We
Yeah,
had Gates Prosper and Frederic Arsenault and Maxime Bouchard, and obviously Jay Prosper was there too in his rookie year, like me, and a lot of guys, and so it was a tough transition. It was a really, really tough transition from being like a Torontonian trying to crack that lineup.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good though. It was good. Like you know, getting to live on your own and you know, getting to live on your own and learning a new city and, you know, maturing in a fast way as you do that when you grow up on your own. And then the guys kind of took a liking to me, and then we ended up, you know, being great teammates for 5 seasons. Unfortunately, in my third year, I tore my ACL when I was playing against Ryerson at the time. So that cut that year short. And then in my fifth year, I tore my right ACL. And I didn't actually end up getting to finish my career. Two very similar plays. Jump stops going left, toward the left ACL, jump stop going right, toward the right ACL, which kind of ignited my passion for coaching, believe it or not, because I knew I couldn't play anymore really with two torn ACLs. I had them surgically reconstructed, but it really like ignited my fuel for coaching, because I knew that it was one way to continue to be involved with the game outside of playing the game. But all in all, like, it was a great experience. Again, the warmth of Montreal is something that people don't recognize, and the people that are so friendly there compared to out where we are here, where it's so ultra competitive and everyone here has a kind of like a chip on their shoulder, whereas there it's just like a more old school feel to the situation. So I really enjoyed and cherish my time over there, and I still maintain a lot of friendships with the people that I knew over there as well. So but yeah, it was fantastic. It was fantastic.
You know, as coaches, we have a lot of something that ignites, like you said, like you loving the game and not being able to play, and that kind of like jump starts, you know, you start looking at the game differently. How can you contribute? How can you serve the game? So that kind of ignites your passion of coaching. But how things were back then, can you kind of like, because this is a great segue, can you just talk about how different, because you mentioned a word right there. You said independence, like you being able to live on your own and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like you having that view of a student athlete there and seeing how things are now. How different is the athlete of today compared to the athlete of, let's say, back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the adults. I think it's the adults that are different. And I think that young people will gravitate to what the adults have as expectations for them. So I think that's the bigger issue. And as a result of that, the athletes will tend to be one way or the other. At that time, you know, I remember even before I got to university, I remember it being in ninth grade. And if I wanted to have a run, if I wanted to go for a run, like not a run, like a basketball run, right? Like I had to literally take the bus with 2 or 3 friends, and we would have to go downtown to George Brown College from where we lived, was like an hour and 20-minute bus ride, go play all day and then come back, right? And having a bag of chips for lunch or something like that. It wasn't like no one was bringing us. Like my parents weren't bringing me. They were working. You know, so if you wanted to do something, you had to do it on your own, and there was not this expectation that other people were going to kind of bail you out.
Right.
And I feel like in today's generation, I feel because it's a very different time. Like there are so many more rep teams and club teams and
options, and
there's millions of options, and there's adults, you know, making money. There's clubs making money. There's prep teams competing. So there's always somebody there that will be in a kid's ear. What we had to do was kind of survive. I don't want to sound like that old guy that said, "Oh, but our generation was better."
Yeah.
It was a different generation. And one of the things that I thought make, you know, even in today's world, like can an athlete survive the pressures of the game in the moment without anybody there to bail them out? Do they have those defense mechanisms in their psyche and their mentality that there's not someone after a bad game or after, can they just cope on their own in a tough environment? And I think that's what we had to do, but not because like we were tougher or whatever. It's just, it was a circumstance of the time, right? Like it was just a different setup basketball wise. It was a different setup with coaches. And I think as a result, the older generation just had to do things that the newer generation not necessarily having to deal with. They have a whole other set of circumstances that we didn't have to deal with, like
Right.
social media pressure, right? Like you get
Right.
on or you get crossed over today, like that's on the internet forever. Like
Yeah.
that's pressure that we did not have to face.
Right.
Ours was a word of mouth. Oh, you got dunked on or whatever, but no
Yeah.
one saw it.
Nobody
Right?
saw it. Yeah.
So I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just
Right.
saying they're two different situations and sets of circumstances that we had to deal with. And I definitely do think, however, is that the older generation had to learn how to be more independent because we didn't have the same amount of access. We had to go seek it. Right. So,
you're no, you're, and it's good that you said that because, um, I think that kind of feeds into how you approach the game. And it's just like, I sense it when you coach your players. A lot of coaches will be like, it's my way or the highway. And I kind of feel like, and this is just me from observing, in the past 3 years, every season you've had a different team. I felt that you've coached and connected with your players differently. You being willing to be adaptable. Now, I don't know if it's just because, obviously we're going to get into it, but Coach Gus is a teacher as well at the school where he's at Hodan. And, you being able to maybe build that relationship outside, you being able to um, have more time with your athletes, because like we talked about it, like you said, you have this ability to have your athletes not just in basketball, but you see them throughout the day. So maybe your approach is a bit different when it comes to that. But it's just a sense that I get that you're doing things that a lot of coaches that I haven't seen a lot of coaches do. And it's like, I feel you being adaptable.
Yeah. So, when I first started off coaching, in the high school level in 2004, I was like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Even though I played in university, I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. And so when we don't know what we're doing, I find that a lot of young coaches, they try to use this autocratic, authoritarian method of coaching because it masks the inability to coach.
And it's also how most of us were coached. So we kind of show what we've learned.
Right. Because that's kind of how we were coached. So the authoritarian method, which is fine, whatever, but authoritarian methods without actually rhyme or reason aren't really all that productive. So as I kind of grew up and got older and I started coaching more years, I kind of realized that wasn't necessarily the best way to do things. And as a teacher, I realized my teaching job is more important than my coaching job because my teaching job is actually what pays my mortgage. Coaching is just like helping kids. So I'm not going to be that authoritarian guy that's cussing and I have to see that child the next day sitting in my class. So there was an adjustment period for me, going through that, man, I can't be like this.
Yeah.
Because they're still kids. So whether or not it was intentional or unintentional, developing relationship with my players is I see them all day long. So you have to kind of draw a fine line between both. So what I've done over the past few years is whether or not we've had success with it or not, it was almost a matter of necessity, is I give them certain expectations and certain things that I hold them accountable to. And then I hold them accountable to it. And they know they're held accountable to that standard. So I don't need to freak out. And I do, but I don't need to freak out because the expectations of what they're doing is extremely clear. And I tell them all the time, you will not get freedom until you show me that you can be disciplined first. So, freedom comes after discipline. And if you want to have freedom, you're going to be disciplined and you're going to be really, really good at what you do. And then you're going to get more freedom. And I think that's been a good method of me being able to hold them accountable without making it personal. For example, as simple as, why is your, 10th guy on the shooting chart jacking up threes? right? So no, don't shoot that 3. Why not, coach? Well, because you're shooting 14%. Okay, so let's get you to 35%. And then you'll shoot more threes. Let's get in the gym earlier, right? So you hold them accountable, but then you try to help them achieve that goal. And then it's easier to discipline them. When they take a bad shot, it's like, well, you're shooting 14%. Right. So it's not even me being like picky and choosy. It's them being picky and choosy. So I feel like it's just easier to not yell and flip your lid when you actually have a strategy or a method that holds people accountable to a standard. And it's just easier that way. And they end up knowing themselves. Like when they can know their own mistakes as a team, then it's just easier for you to keep your calm and coach the team as opposed to just freaking out all the time.
That's where.
So yeah.
No, sorry.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's like you said accountability, and it's like the way that you're, holding them accountable in that way. It seems very like you earn what you get. And I think like that circles back to kind of like what we're saying is your approach and you being able to use the game. A lot of players are going to respect that because it's something that potentially you allow them to get, but they feel like they've earned it. Like you earn the right to shoot. You earn this freedom. You earn, like, it's not like you just give it to them. And just from my experience, just especially this year, me being able to coach this younger group, I don't put no emphasis on like basketball per se. Like our standards have a lot of time they have nothing to do with just basketball. It's effort. It's how you treat each other. It's picking each other's up, right? And all these things. And I find that resonates a lot better with something that is more result based, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. So I'll give you an example. So when we played you, like, I'm not the coach of the junior team. Obviously Franklin's the coach of the junior team. I'm helping the junior team out. But when we played you guys in that event and we had a 28-point lead, I don't know if you realize that, but we were up 28 points with 4 minutes to go in the third. And you guys I didn't even realize we were up 28. I had no idea we were up 28.
Yo.
And you guys made this monstrous comeback and you guys beat us on,
the Zach Walker 3.
Correct. So in true fashion, like that was a really tough, pill to swallow for everyone involved in our program. And, people were pointing fingers and everyone was upset and everyone started blaming that possession, this possession, that possession, this possession. And I'm like, okay, so this is all useless, wasted energy right now. So going back to what you said, it's not really about basketball itself. There's a lot more behind the scenes. So what I did is I actually went and I charted that entire game myself. So I had it filmed because we film every game, and I charted every possession. I charted the rebounds. I charted the turnovers. I charted the shooting percentage from 2, from 3, free throws. I even went so deep as to chart like, assists that weren't given. Like I just charted everything, and then I just laid it out to the team, and I put it all there for the world to see how many minutes each kid played. Right. And then when you have the data, right, then you start analyzing the data and you start realizing that, in this particular game, not overall, but in this particular game, there was a lot of selfishness that was going on, and particularly in the third and fourth quarters that led to the downfall in that game. So it wasn't like the kid forgot how to play basketball, that the brain was thinking different things. And that's not a basketball thing. Like that's a psychological thing. As a coach, it's not only about, can you make a jump shot? It's like, where's your mind at? So holding kids accountable to each other and to a high level outside of the game itself, like not knowing how to make a dribble or like whatever the case may be. It has nothing to do with basketball. Right. So we showed them that, we laid it out there, and now it's like we hold them accountable, and then we chart every game, and it's like, okay, you're telling me you're a shooter, but you're 3 for 25 over the last 4 games. So how are you a shooter? Someone
take
told
shots.
You? Right. So to your point about like, not necessarily about the game. It's not about the game at that point. It's about a bunch of circumstances, people in kids' ears, people in the stand, people telling people how fantastic they are. And it's just like, it's irritating. But anyways,
you hit the nail right on the head. But since we're talking about just that specific event, like here's where it was. Okay, at the beginning of the game, you guys came out, punched us in the face, boom, right? And like you said, you guys built this lead, and I remember at halftime, I took two of my players and I brought them at half court, and I said, just look at your teammates' body language right now. All week in practice, we didn't talk about us making a lot of threes. We didn't talk about us dunking. We didn't talk about none of that. We said, whenever somebody makes a mistake, give them a high five, right? When you feel like there's a storm in the game, you guys should be huddling up. Like nothing to do with basketball. So those two guys, which I give these guys credit to, they brought the guys together before halftime. So if you watch the video, you'll see they all get together and then they walk back to the bench. And from that moment on, I just felt like I even had a player who didn't have a good first half. When I rewatched the film, I see him clapping. I see him, applauding his teammates and all that kind of stuff. And for me, what that really showed me was, when you hit that down, the mental part of the game is not really understood and not really explained and taught to coaches, because what you really have to pay attention to is when your players are down, do you have enough systems in place to allow them to kind of like figure things out? Like you had said, can I rely on somebody? If I don't make the next shot, are my teammates still going to give it to me again? But it goes the same way, both ways. But I'm getting the sense that, like you said, there's both ways. There are both sides to it. You got to keep playing the right way, and not let the results affect how you approach the game. Whether my teammate misses that shot and that's the right pass to make, am I making that pass 100% of the time? Because it's the right pass to make.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you're saying that, because I was just looking at it and I was like, now that you said that, I'm like, well, usually what ends up happening is when you have a big lead, players get comfortable, right? You get a bit comfortable. And then what happens is that, everybody scored. Now it's my turn. Yeah. And then what happens now is another team goes on a momentum, because it's such a game of momentum. So now what ends up happening is the next person's like, I haven't touched it in a while. It's my turn. And then that's how when you get into that little spiral, I'm sure you've seen it happen.
That's why I say when the overarching principle of that game became selfishness, because it for us, having the big lead, it became about, okay, now it's my turn to whatever, right? Maybe mixed six is watching in the stands, maybe whatever it may be, and as a result it unraveled. But it was probably the best thing that happened to our team, that loss, because it was able to make the kids listen. And then as a result, we've been playing such really, really good basketball at the junior level. Since that point in time. But again, it's relatable to everything. Like, it's just easier to hold kids accountable when you have a structure in place for them, and you start to know their strengths and weaknesses and what they do and what they don't do, and having them expand their game at that level. Like, we're still in a developmental stage in high school, especially at junior. Like, it's more development than it is about wins and losses. Like, I think it's a travesty to have people have the highlight of their basketball career in grade 9 or grade 10. So like, who cares about that? Like, let's move them from point A to point B and see if they can get onto a post-secondary team and get some free education or whatever they may be, right? So like, again, it's holding kids accountable so that they can get better at what they do. So like, for example, the kid on your team that's the laziest, that doesn't run back in transition, whether or not you have a transition defense system or not, they just don't get ahead of the ball. They don't put effort to get back. They don't have an awareness to get back. Maybe they do a layup and they fall out of bounds, and now that's their time to take a break because they fell out of bounds on purpose. Not back. Well, I make that kid inbound. So I always make that kid inbound for us in our transition offense. Because now the ball's going to be sitting there bouncing. The other team scores, that ball's going to be bouncing, and that kid's still running back. And when the other kid tries to inbound for that kid, I'm like, nah, don't touch the ball. Now there's a method there to hold that kid accountable. There's an expectation.
Right.
he doesn't inbound the ball quickly, then there's a sub at the table
Right.
waiting for him. So it's like using the game within the game to hold kids accountable. Which is your kid that loves to like doesn't want to pass? Well, you're on shot probation. You give me 3 assists first, and then now you can shoot a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 3 assists.
Yeah.
You're on shot probation right now. So again, holding kids so that they expand their game. They continue to expand it. But anyways, that's a whole
Yeah.
other.
No, but
Yeah.
the stuff that they learned from it is also like huge, because you're saying that basically off the inbounding example, what you're basically saying is you could also figure out why certain players, because I was just having this discussion with somebody. Everybody, like, a lot of times we just say, oh, this player doesn't care, this player doesn't care. That's not true. Everybody cares, but there's people care differently. There's different things that they care about. And it's like that example that you gave, what that kind of like, what automatically where my brain went is, now I'm going to figure out, are you more, when your teammates start getting mad that we can't push the ball up, we can't play in transition, does that do something to you?
Right.
That's
right.
so interesting what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. Does it internally motivate them to want to get back on defense? Right. And as a result, now we can attack on offense, because really the game is in four areas, right?
Yeah.
So if we can't do any of those, like half court offense, half court defense, transition from offense to defense, and transition from defense to offense, that's the entire game. And if we can do each one of those 4 things really, really well and at a high level, we'll have our chance at success. And if one of those things aren't happening, then at least you're able to identify why and hold the kids accountable to it.
Right.
So like, whatever it may be, right? It's, whatever your structure is, whatever your defensive philosophies are, whatever your offensive philosophies are, if you have a plan and it's very crystal clear, then it's really easy to sub a kid off because they didn't do their job.
Right.
And when they do their job effectively, I feel like then it's easier to say, okay, now go have a bigger job. It's almost like getting a promotion in a business or in whatever. You do really well, you're going to get promoted.
Yeah.
And then you'll have more freedom. And then you get to the point where you can even wave off the coach. If you're really good, like you can now wave off the coach and say, I got this.
Yeah.
This is like really high level stuff, which is what you want to get high school kids to, that level.
Absolutely.
Where they take that level of accountability, and it's like, man, okay, this kid, that's my guy.
Right.
That's what
I always tell people, like, the best feeling and my goal at the end of the year is like, I want to be able to sit back and just see my kids coach the game themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's the greatest feeling.
Going back to us having to take a bus for an hour and 20 minutes to George Brown College in 9th grade to go hoop, because there was no one holding my hand and telling us what to do.
Right.
That's when you become, I feel like, a special talent, when you're self-motivated and self-disciplined, and you're able to do things without like somebody having to prompt or push you. Absolutely. And being able to succeed in pressure without, your club coach in the stands. Like, can you do
it? Absolutely. Continuing on special talent, like you've had a busy season last year, but you had a busy end of season. Like, the beauty of what you do is that your season doesn't end like a lot of people, like in March, April. Like, you have the kids until the end, so you got to continue. You got to help some of them graduate, find post-secondary education and all that kind of stuff. And you do have some special talent that walks into your gym. And last spring, you guys got the chance to just retire Nickeil Alexander's Walker, his jersey, in your school. And so now you have 2 jerseys. You have Nickeil and Andrew Wiggins, eh?
Well, we actually have 4. So
4.
When we retired Andrews, we also retired his older brothers, Nick and Mitch. And the way we viewed that is like for 2 ways. So Nickeil was the 4th jersey. So yes, Andrew made it to first pick of the NBA draft, right?
Yep.
But the pathway was paved by his family.
Got you.
Right? Because
that's amazing.
He was the youngest of the 3, and then Mitch ended up playing in college, and Nick ended up playing in college as well, and he's still playing pro today. And so when Andrew came, like, the success of Andrew was also as a direct result of his older brothers beating him up, playing and played in the NBA, and then being immersed in that entire journey with his family. So we viewed it as, not only did Andrew make it as the #1 draft pick, but he was a product also of the support of his family. And that's why when we retired the 3 boys, we felt it was fitting at the time to do that.
Love it.
You know what I mean? Because of that lineage of basketball family. And Nikhil, when we did Nikhil's last year, and we have obviously Andrew Nemhard, so we have 3 players that played on that small gym floor in the league, which is pretty cool actually. And the 3 guys that made it, Andrew, Nikhil, and Andrew, they all had very different pathways to the league, but they had one commonality between the 3 of them, is that they never let you down. And you're like, well, what does that even mean, they never let you down? So what I mean by that is that when we have future NBA players amongst us, like obviously at the Athlete Institute, and they've had a bunch of guys, and Leonard Miller over at Fort Erie, and all the other teams that have had an NBA guy, like you would expect like that they conduct themselves like they're too good for your program and your coaching, right? You would think that would be a thought. But none of those guys ever had that quality, like that characteristic where they actually listened and soaked in information and were very positive and high character people. And as a result of that, I feel like that just allows them to just continue forward and use that high character to like soak in information and continue to improve their craft. So, they had different paths to the league, but the one commonality was that they're amazing people that are willing to learn. And it's just something that I don't think people realize how important that is. They don't let you down. They don't let you down.
Yeah. And it also, I'm assuming it also helps the rest of the team, right? Like when I always say, like when the best player can work like he's the worst player, like that helps a lot, and being the best player a lot of time it doesn't mean scoring a lot of points, right? So what are some things, obviously all these guys have such great abilities to put the ball in the basket, but what would you say is a skill that, besides scoring, that the best player on the team, like potential NBA guys, have that is maybe like not scoring?
It's funny. I was just having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine. I think it's what's between the ears, in 2 facets. I think it's the mental toughness part of it, which I know that gets thrown around a lot, like as a cliche, mental toughness, and also the ability to kind of see the game through a clear lens. I feel like that's the difference. I don't think it's a difference of a physical thing. I don't think it's a physical thing. People say like, well, Andrew Wiggins is so athletic, like he's one of the top 5%, and that's why he made it. That's not why he made it. That's in addition to everything he is as a basketball player. And if he wasn't a high level basketball player, he would not be able to play at Golden State with all the stuff that they're running, with all the systems, the high IQ of Draymond Green and Curry, and the ball's moving and they're flying around and they're doing. Not every player can fit in that. You can't just be an athlete and fit in that system. Right. And the same thing with Nikhil and Andrew. I feel like their ability to process the game, but also have that mental toughness about them, is when all the pressure's on, like, I think that's what separates those guys from other talented players that just never make it at that level. Like, I'm certainly no NBA coach. I'm certainly no Division I college coach. It's just my, perception of the things that I saw. But, there are people that obviously coach at way higher levels that might have a different opinion on things. So that's just what I think and I see.
Absolutely. Listen, we got the chance to do this. I got one final question, but first of all, thank you so much for making the time. I know it gets busy. Busy. Real quick, for the in 2 minutes, can you summarize? We had we had spoken and you were telling me about the importance of work-life balance. And you were talking to me about like we have an NBA coach and he would always be in his office all the time, all the time. Can you kind of like go on like why work-life balance is super important? I don't want to steal your thunder, so I don't want to say the story. So that's why I want to.
Yeah, and I don't want to say any NBA coaches' names,
Mm-hmm.
just because I just don't want to do that. But I'll
Absolutely.
give you two examples, and I would say
Absolutely.
there are two polar opposite coaches in the NBA, which I've heard stories about.
Mm-hmm.
From people that kind of know.
Mm-hmm.
And the one person is just grinding 18, 19 hours a day to be successful in the league, and the other person is also grinding, but when they leave the arena, they're now a family man. They're like, and we're talking about coaches right now, we're not talking about players.
Coaches, yeah.
There's other stuff that you have to prioritize, right? And I think all of us get caught up in that as coaches, that use coaches. We lose a game and our mind is now fixated on like, man, why does that kid make that pass? I can't believe so can you separate those two and understand that having that balance not only makes you a better coach, it makes you a better person in your private life. And the thing is, I think players also want to understand that they too are even though everyone keeps telling them how important you got to grind every day, they're still human beings, and basketball is not necessarily their only identity. So I think if you're a coach and you also have balance in your life, where you can shake off a tough loss and still go out for dinner with your family and even hang out with your players, and even if they had a really bad turnover, you treat them like a human, I think that actually helps you become a better coach. And I think it helps them become better players, and I think it helps your team. So by demonstrating by example work-life balance, I think that also helps basketball players recognize that. Like training 8 hours a day is not helpful. Having an hour and a half or two hours of intense focus training is better than 8 hours of, whatever, monotony. So again, that balance I feel like is really important. Really, really important.
It's amazing. Coach Gymnopoulos, you guys, what you got going on at Hodan, like I'm literally able to witness you just allowing these kids to express themselves and you helping and assisting them and all that. So for me, I really appreciate what you do for the game. I appreciate our friendship, because there isn't a time where when when things are calm and I call you, you always pick up. And it's always a good time when I meet you and when we talk and all of that. So listen, I appreciate you so much. I know it's a busy time, but we got a chance to get it done, man. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, Olivier, and I always have time for good people, man. And like your positivity as a coach is something that I actually look for. I take from you from that aspect of it, and I think that's more people should be like that. Because even like I said, again, we're the interview's almost done, but like even when you guys were down to us, you never maintained your positivity. You were still kind of like encouraging and imploring your guys to do their thing, and it paid off, right? So
yeah,
kudos to you.
I appreciate you, coach. Thank you. And like you said, like I'm learning every day, and I appreciate I got people like you that just help me out. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you. All right.
All right.